Jules Verne to Star Trek, from the early manned Mercury flights to the moonwalks of the Apollo program. Space has been the substance of our dreams and the focus of commercial and military exploitation. From the earliest rocket experiments to the current satellites that bring us cellular telephones, television, and the World Wide Web, space has become an integral part of our daily lives. With over 7,000 objects currently in orbit around the Earth and large satellite networks proposed for the near future, it is evident that space has become crucial to worldwide economic development and national security. The men and women of today's Air Force have been instrumental in maintaining the U.S. position as the world's air and space power leader. The heritage of the U.S. Air Force is rich, mainly due to the ideas and inventiveness of airmen throughout history. This program reviews the development of America's space power and the impact it has on today's and will likely have on tomorrow's military operations. Early in the 20th century, military leaders incorporated the three-dimensional advantages of air power into warfare. Today, air, land, and sea forces use another advantage to conduct military operations: space. Complexities of modern warfare clearly suggest that air and space superiority may be the decisive factor in who wins future battles. It is critical that America's Air Force be prepared to plan for and conduct military operations in and from the high ground of space. Space, that vast expanse beyond Earth's atmosphere. Since humans first ventured beyond the atmosphere, nations have sought to exploit the economic, political, and strategic advantages that space offers. Space power is the capability to exploit space forces to support our national security strategy and achieve national security objectives. In short, America's space power is made up of the national, civil, and commercial space resources employed to achieve national security objectives. Department of Defense and civil satellite systems, ground-based command and control and tracking stations, launch systems, and the people who operate, maintain, and support those systems constitute this framework of America's space power arm. Another critical element of our military space power is the technology and operational assistance that our space industry contributes to national security strategy. These elements, combined with America's commitment to fully exploit the advantages of space, have established the U.S. as the world's premier space power. Our nation relies on the Air Force to control and exploit space, helping to ensure our national security. Space is the largest of the four physical operating media and surrounds all others. An extension of the air environment, the ultimate high ground of space offers commanders and national leadership a global perspective. The advantages of the space medium are derived from elevation and unimpeded global access. Unrestricted overflight allows for continuous collection and dissemination of worldwide information vital to U.S. national security. Unlike aircraft, spacecraft are not totally reliant upon powered flight to sustain altitude and attitude. Many orbiting spacecraft require minimal ground station contact to sustain their positions in orbit and their operational activities. The predictable flight path by satellites across the Earth's surface is altered only by ground station command or the effects of nature. The Earth's gravitational pull, solar activity, and other natural forces eventually cause all spacecraft to re-enter the Earth's atmosphere. Another advantage of spacecraft is the ability to provide global coverage. A satellite in geosynchronous orbit, 22,300 miles above the Earth's equator, will remain over the same point on the Earth, providing coverage for nearly one-third of the globe. A spacecraft in a near-polar, low-Earth orbit, perhaps 200 miles above the Earth, will view most of the Earth's surface within several orbits. Therefore, by varying altitude, velocity, and orientation of spacecraft, satellite constellations can be orchestrated to meet a theater commander's specific needs. The flexibility and responsiveness of space systems permit a near instantaneous means of providing continuous coverage to support both combat and non-combat activities. Space systems providing a non-intrusive global presence enable real-time and near real-time support throughout the full range of military operations. These advantages, when combined with America's air, land, and sea power, provide the U.S. with superior military capabilities. This was demonstrated clearly during the 1991 Gulf War, but this remarkable success began many decades earlier. Although the theories of spaceflight came from the principles of Sir Isaac Newton and other great physicists, it was Robert H. Goddard who is recognized as the father of contemporary space exploration. Goddard was the first American to postulate that a rocket could be propelled into outer space. Influenced by Jules Verne's and H.G. Wells' late 19th century fictional space works, Goddard dedicated himself to research and experimentation with rocket fuels and propulsion systems that might propel objects into space. In the late 1930s, Goddard successfully tested many of his theories. Unfortunately, the impending prospect of a Second World War placed a veil of secrecy over his work. In 1939, the United States, Soviet Union, Great Britain, and Germany began pursuing the development of a rocket-powered weapon. The most famous of these programs was Germany's medium-range ballistic missile program, the V-2. Though largely a weapon of terror, the V-2 attack served to motivate both the U.S. and Russia to secure the V-2 technology as the war closed. On 7 November 1944, General Hap Arnold asked Dr. Theodore von Karman to organize the Army Air Force's Scientific Advisory Group to outline a research and development program guiding the Air Forces for the next 20 years. The Scientific Advisory Board published the results of its findings in a document 14 months later titled Toward New Horizons. It foretold that future combat might include rocket barrages with atomic warheads. Later, in 1945, the U.S. retained over 450 top German missile scientists, including Germany's chief V-2 scientist, Wernher von Braun. Von Braun would become instrumental in many future U.S. space achievements and a key figure in establishing America's initial space strategy. In 1945, America's interest in pursuing space activities accelerated when von Braun reunited Hitler's former V-2 program scientists to form the nucleus of America's civilian and military space program. Their report to the U.S. Army on the potential of rocket-launched satellites generated intense competition within the military over which service would become the primary lead for space activities. Major General Curtis LeMay, Director for Research and Development for the Army Air Forces, commissioned the RAND Corporation to study the military applications of space. RAND proposed a military satellite system to support the nation's intelligence effort in tracking Soviet nuclear weapons development. This was America's first step toward using space in support of national security goals. The infancy of America's space power originated directly from the ensuing nuclear arms race. In the late 1950s, after initially concentrating on airborne reconnaissance, President Eisenhower directed acceleration of the Vanguard satellite program. The Vanguard program and the President's policy on space access were originally designed to provide a legitimate cover story for the U.S. space-based intelligence collection program, Corona. The intent was also to dilute world interest in U.S. plans to exploit space for national and military purposes. But before the Vanguard or Corona programs could be launched, the world was shocked by the shot heard and seen around the globe. On 4 October 1957, the Soviet Union placed Sputnik 1 to a low Earth orbit using a modified intercontinental ballistic missile. Sputnik 1 remained on orbit for 57 days and established the Soviet Union as the first nation to reach space. This confirmed U.S. fears of Soviet advancements in space and missile technologies and launched what became known as the space race. On 31 January 1958, the U.S. entered space with the first launch of the Explorer satellite program. These events, along with America's recognition of the potential value of space, serve as the genesis of America's space power today. Space, as the ultimate high ground, became vividly clear when on 2 August 1990, Space Systems detected the invasion of Kuwait by Iraqi forces. This timely warning from space assisted U.S. decision-makers in planning and executing America's military response. It is speculated that the space-based warning of the Iraqi invasion may have been the most critical step in deterring Iraq's military advance into Saudi Arabia. As Operation Desert Shield progressed, Space Systems provided continuous communications, weather, positional information, surveillance, and reconnaissance, all crucial to pre-Gulf War planning and staging. Chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff General Colin Powell remarked, "Satellites were the single most important factor that enabled us to build the command, control, and communications network for Desert Shield." In fact, over 85% of intra-theater communications and the majority of inter-theater communications were provided by satellite. Prior to the 17 January 1991 initiation of the air war against Iraq, elements of America's space power played a significant role in target and weapons selection, terrain analysis, and flight route planning for both strategic and operational level airstrike missions. Meteorological and Earth resource satellite imagery provided weather and terrain information that was instrumental in identifying the most suitable air corridors, as well as atmospheric conditions necessary for the best weapons selection for target destruction. Another significant space contribution during the Gulf War was the missile launch detection and warning information provided on impending Iraqi Scud attacks. Accurate and immediate warning of missile attacks was provided theater-wide by the Defense Support Program, or DSP, satellite system. DSP and other space assets provided crucial correlation information of Scud trajectories to the Patriot batteries, thus enhancing the Patriot system's organic interception capability. Space power's many contributions during the Gulf War earned praise and support from national leaders and military commanders. It's now difficult to imagine any future battle without space power. General Charles A. Horner, Joint Force Air Component Commander for the Gulf War and later Commander-in-Chief, United States Space Command, put it best when he said, "Our experience in Desert Storm was a watershed for space power. Space is now so integral to joint and combined military operations that were we to remove space assets from our military arsenal, we would be relegated to employing warfighting tactics much like those of World War II." The Gulf War demonstrated space power's essential contribution to terrestrial warfighters. Additionally, the Gulf War acted as a catalyst for the development of tactical space applications for future military conflicts. Regional and geopolitical instability, rapid technological change, and proliferation of weapons of mass destruction will force changes in the way military leaders think about space. Just as the airplane evolved from an observation platform during World War I, space power will continue to mature as an integral part of global engagement, the Air Force's vision for the 21st century. The U.S. is unsurpassed as the world's leader in space. However, the relatively easy access to commercial space information that can be exploited militarily is slowly eroding that lead. Commercially available space capabilities now include navigation, communications, weather, surveillance, reconnaissance, and multispectral imagery technologies. These readily available products may provide a future adversary with many of the same advantages now available to U.S. combat forces. The proliferation of space-based systems with military applications and the commercial availability of militarily significant satellite information may challenge America's ability to retain de facto space superiority in future conflicts. To remain the world's leader in space, America must continue to exploit space and stand ready to counter future space threats. Space power plays a prominent role in shaping future Air Force and national security strategy. With sizable force drawdowns worldwide, space systems offer the ability to fill some of the void created by overseas base closures and diminished human intelligence. Space surveillance and reconnaissance keep national and military leaders cognizant of international developments and potential threats to national interest. Panchromatic and multispectral imagery space assets provide commanders with critical surveillance data, terrain analysis, weather, and order of battle information. America's space power keeps U.S. leaders informed of events related to national security, helping to expedite crisis action planning and resolution even before a potential aggressor acts. The global awareness derived from a robust space infrastructure provides global presence without incurring the substantial cost or direct threat inherent in surface force deployments. This continuous presence, combined with America's superior air, land, and sea power, strengthens deterrence. The future of space power is vast. Advancements in laser and directed energy weapons will offer theater commanders a space-based air and missile defense system for their theater air defense architectures. Evolving digital technologies and expanding communications capabilities will provide a future weapons reprogramming capability after the weapon has been released. Space control and the potential for force application in and from the space environment will become increasingly important to the theater commander. Not only must friendly space support and force enhancement missions remain protected from threats, it must be assumed that any future adversary's space capability or access to space information will have to be neutralized to ensure that a commander's objectives are attained. This might include a spectrum of offensive space operations ranging from disruption of hostile ground stations to satellite attack. The potential for space in the roles of space control and force application will ensure the decisiveness of any future U.S. military operation. Though some of these concepts seem futuristic, it was less than 40 years ago that humans first traveled into space. The foundations of modern space application that are developed today will mold the future of America's aerospace force. It is entirely possible that the wars of the 21st century may be controlled through and fought within the space environment. The uniqueness of space offers America many military advantages. These advantages will continue to increase through further exploitation. Like air power, space power can support U.S. political and military objectives at all levels of war, either independently or in combination. In the future, space systems will likely not only support terrestrial forces, but also be capable of achieving strategic, operational, and tactical level effects. The foundation of America's space power is best summed up in the second tenet of the 1988 Air Force Space Policy. We, the United States Air Force, must be prepared for the evolution of space power from combat support to the full spectrum of military capabilities. Space is no longer just a subject of dreams. It is no longer based upon science fiction and vivid imaginations. America's space power expands the joint military horizon, allowing military forces increased awareness, accelerated operations tempo, and improved responsiveness. Space power is a proven component of America's political and military power, demonstrating its inherent capability to enhance and foster a warfighter's ability to fight and decisively win wars.